We are still expecting some more rain, but those weather warnings have been downgraded. In fact, here in Wangaratta, I can see some blue sky appearing over the clouds there. So it doesn't necessarily mean, though, that these flood warnings will be downgraded, and they're expected to remain in place for some time. Now, as you mentioned, a lot of the towns along the King River, Mount Buffalo, Goulburn and Kiewa River regions are also still considered to be at risk of flooding, and the Ovens River, which is where we are here. But I'm standing next to actually a flood marker, and it hasn't yet reached even the minor levels, but there is still concern that these rivers could swell and flooding could continue.
And what's been the effect on the communities in the region so far? I mean, I imagine that there are still some roads that may be cut off. People still, in some parts, I understand Myrtleton, for instance, are on an evacuation alert for those floodwaters.
Yeah, that's right. Still prepare to evacuate warnings for the town of Myrtleford, but significant rainfall, as you've mentioned, over 200 millimetres in some parts. In fact, over 30 towns in regional Victoria have experienced their record rainfall. And those records stood for about 100 years. So the effect on these towns has been relatively minor, though, in terms of what the warnings were. There were dire warnings on Friday. We were expecting record flooding. However, the towns seem to have coped relatively well. We spent yesterday, most of yesterday in Euroa, where we did see some flooding and some evacuations. In fact, we saw a whole caravan park evacuated, but we're still, and there's been several calls for assistance as well. In fact, 2,700 calls to the SES as of yesterday evening, and they're expecting more tonight. A lot of those calls have been just for minor assistance, but also for cars stuck in water. So they're urging people on the roads to stay vigilant. As you mentioned, there's still some road closures, and you'd expect that a lot of these towns that have experienced flooding on the riverbanks, it will take a few days for them to clean up and recover from this flooding event.
Now, you mentioned there, Elias, that you had been in touch with the Bureau of Meteorology. Any update on whether that weather, in fact, is going to continue to be clear, or might we expect some more rainfalls in the next 24 hours or so?
Yeah, so they are expecting more rainfall in the next 24 hours, but it'll only be minor and sporadic. And in fact, that's been one of the unpredictable things about this weather event. It's been hard to predict. A lot of invariable weather over parts of the state, and a lot of that weather has fallen in catchments, but they're just not sure as to what sort of damage it will cause, and they're still urging people to stay vigilant, as I said, and continue to monitor the weather as it continues over the next few days.